that when it comes to so-called acceptable radiation levels in Japan, following the Fukushima Daiichi triple meltdown nuclear disaster that started on March 11 of 2011, and you compare it with Chernobyl and you learn,
after the Chernobyl disaster, Ukraine designated evacuation zone based on 5 millisieverts per year standard. Japanese government lacks a safety limit of radiation for general public to 20 millisieverts per year standard when it was 1 millisieverts per year standard before the accident. So in terms of external radiation exposure, Japanese government is exposing more than former Soviet Union did.
well, when you hear something like that from someone who really knows, and then you learn that over 4,000 Japanese citizens took part in a scientific study to gather data on radiation levels that the government's been afraid to compile, and then you learn what Japanese radiation levels really are all over the country, including Tokyo, you know that the time has come to cancel your plans to attend the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, because no matter where your seats are for any sporting event, you will be sitting in that dangerously uncomfortable seat that we all share.
Nuclear hot seat. What are those people thinking? Nuclear hot seat. What have those boys been drinking? Nuclear hot seat. The corium is sinking. Our time to act is shrinking, but our activists are linking. Nuclear hot seat. It's the bomb.
Welcome to Nuclear Hot Seat, the weekly international news magazine keeping you up to date on all things nuclear from a different perspective. My name is Libby Halevi. I'm the producer and host, as well as a survivor of the nuclear accident at 3 Mile Island from just 1 mile away. So I know what can happen when those nuclear so-called experts get it wrong. This week, a report on a cornerstone study on radiation in Japan since the Fukushima nuclear triple meltdown began on March 11, 2011. The resulting 200-page book has been selling far beyond projections in Japan and has just been published in digest form in English. We talk with Mare Inoue, a co-founding member of the Manhattan Project for a Nuclear-Free Future, and one of the team members who helped create the English-language version. Powerful informations from the front lines of citizen activists fighting for the truth on Fukushima's aftermath. We will also have nuclear news from around the world, numbnuts of the week for outstanding nuclear boneheadedness, and more honest nuclear information than has yet appeared on Netflix. All of it coming up in just a few moments. Today is Tuesday, October 22nd, 2019, and here is the week's nuclear news from a different perspective. Starting off in the U.S., where Ohioans Against Corporate Bailouts has not filed referendum petitions that would put House Bill 6, the bailout for a pair of nuclear power plants, on hold until a state referendum is held. They filed a lawsuit that contends a state law requiring the Attorney General to certify summary language for the petition unconstitutionally consumed 38 of the 99 days it had to gather signatures following the passage of House Bill 6 by the Republican-dominated legislature and its signing by Republican Governor Mike DeWine. The group's lawsuit, arguing it should be granted more time for its petition drive, is being held today, Tuesday, October 22nd, in front of U.S. District Court Judge Edmund Sargas, Jr. No word yet on whether they succeeded. We'll fill you in next week. In Piketon, Ohio, a long-awaited environmental study of what is being called alleged contamination, possibly spreading from the defunct Portsmouth gaseous diffusion plant, still is in the works, according to a recent update provided by the Pike County Health Commissioner Matt Brewster. Residents and plant critics began calling for a third-party independent study of the alleged contamination coming from the former uranium enrichment plant in Piketon after the discovery of radioactive contamination inside Zons Corner Middle School, which has been closed indefinitely and the property around it fenced off. I'm not even using all of the disqualifying adjectives that were put in by this article in the Portsmouth Daily Times. Vina Kali of Portsmouth Piketon Residents for Environmental Safety and Security and National Nuclear Workers for Justice said, "This community has been sacrificed by the government for too long. The DOE should pay for chemical testing along with radiation testing. We know and they know about the off-site pollution. It is time they come clean so we can move forward." In Navajo Nation, the Environmental Protection Agency has awarded Tetra Tech a contract to clean up Navajo Nation lands, despite knowing that its subsidiary had likely engaged in data manipulation, false reporting, and profiteering. This in connection with the task of cleaning up the radioactive former naval shipyard Hunters Point in San Francisco. 2 former company supervisors have been sentenced to 8 months in jail for falsifying records related to Hunters Point, and whistleblower litigation is still ongoing. This is who the EPA trusts to clean up Navajo Nation because, hey, when you've got that irresistible urge to indulge in environmental racism and commit minority ecocide, there's no better way to do it than to go with proven intentional incompetence. In this numbnuts adjacent story, the U.S. military has announced that it will no longer use floppy disks, 8-inch floppy disks, to coordinate nuclear launches. What a relief. As we alarmingly learned in 2014, the U.S. military has been using 8-inch floppy disks in an antiquated 1970s computer to receive nuclear launch orders from the president should they be sent. Now, the U.S. Strategic Command has announced that it has replaced the drives with a, quote, highly secure solid-state digital storage solution that is thought to be unhackable because it is so old and was created long before the internet existed. You can't hack something that doesn't have an IP address, they said. Yes, but those codes are still linked to the unilateral decision of whoever holds the presidency to control the nuclear launch codes. And if that's not numbnuts enough for you...
Nuclear hot seat, nuclear hot seat, nuclear hot seat, numbnuts of the week.
A U.S. Navy doomsday aircraft meant to survive a nuclear attack and carry high-level government and military personnel who have survived so that they can attack another day, recently met its match, a bird. Oh, Mr. Hitchcock, you warned us. The bird strike took out one of the plane's 4 engines, and the U.S. Navy declared it a Class A mishap, meaning the event caused more than $2 million in damages, death, or permanent disability. Since no death or permanent disability have been reported, it cost more than $2 million smackaroos from the damage. The event occurred on October 2nd, when the aircraft struck an as-yet unidentified bird. No injuries were reported, except for the bird, and the bird has not been identified pending notification of its next of kin. The plane landed safely on the runway at the air station, and now we've got to come up with that 2 million smackaroos, or our fearful leaders will not be able to escape the doomsday they create. And that's this week's Your
Nuclear hot seat, numbnuts of the week.
In Japan, a new scientific study has shown the distribution of highly radioactive microparticles throughout Fukushima. The released radioactivity included small, poorly soluble cesium-rich microparticles that have a very high radioactivity per mass. This new study was just published in the scientific journal Chemosphere and involved scientists from Japan, Finland, France, and the U.S. They discovered 3 areas of interest within 50 kilometers, about 40 miles from the Fukushima Daiichi site. This is not the same as the study that we are going to be discussing during today's interview. Another alarming study in Japan shows that women make up 80% of cancer patients aged 20 to 39. This is primarily driven by an increase in breast and cervical cancer and came from an analysis of 62,000 cancer patients. And children up to age 14 made up 4,500 of these patients, nearly 14%. And they had leukemia or brain tumors, and a small number were diagnosed with quote-unquote rare cancers, which for me is always a flag for find out where the radiation is coming from. The South Korean Ministry of Health and Welfare has raised its concerns over radioactive water disposal at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant in Japan during the 70th World Health Organization's West Pacific Regional Conference. Ministry official Kang Da-tae said, disposing of radioactive water into the sea is not just a problem for Japan, but an international issue that can have significant impact on the marine environment of the Western Pacific region and the health of its people. If you want to know more about the World Health Organization's unreliability when it comes to being honest about nuclear issues, we direct you to Nuclear Hot Seat number 422 from July 13, 2019, and our interview with Alison Katz of Independent WHO. It's an eye-opener. Mikhail Gorbachev, the final leader of the Soviet Union, warned that the world was drifting into a dangerous sea of militarized politics and appealed to Moscow and Washington to sit down for urgent nuclear arms control talks. And radioactive chlorine from 1950s nuclear bomb tests are still present in Antarctica. This stuff never goes away. We'll have this week's featured interview in just a moment, but first, hey, do you appreciate being able to hear the nuclear news every week on Nuclear Hot Seat? Thought so. That's why you're here. And you understand that we do everything in our power to make this information palatable while sticking to the verifiable facts. Yes, there's humor, puns, literary allusions, funny voices. I've got no shame in using my showbiz background to do what needs to be done to put the message across. But that's just the window dressing. The core of Nuclear Hot Seat is the honest information. Hardcore interviews and shout-outs to activists and activities opposing nuclear around the world. Where else would you get all this information in one easy-to-swallow weekly package? That's the wind-up. Here's the pitch. This show runs on donations. We wouldn't be able to continue. And trust me, you would not be getting this much nuclear information from the New York Times or any other mainstream media outlet, even in the course of a year. So pardon my intrusion into the anti-nuclear info stream, but this is important. Help keep Nuclear Hot Seat up and running by making a donation. We make it easy for you to do so. Just go to nuclearhotseat.com and click on the big red donate button to send a one-time donation of any size or set up a continuing donation of any size. Help us keep providing you with the best possible nuclear information from the longest-running program of its type anywhere in the world, 8.5 years and running. Know that whatever you do to help, I'm deeply grateful that you're listening and that you care. Here's this week's featured interview. Mare Inoue Esquire was born and raised in Tokyo, Japan. While working as an immigration attorney in New York City, she has been active in grassroots movements against nuclear weapons and nuclear power plants. As a co-founding member of the Manhattan Project for a Nuclear-Free World, she plays an important role in organizing projects and events to raise awareness about the ongoing grave situation in Fukushima, and to advocate in the U.S. for the importance of promoting carbon-free, nuclear-free policies in order to protect the most vulnerable groups in our society. Mari was part of a team that translated into English the breakthrough book Citizens Radiation Data Map of Japan. As you will hear, the original Japanese book is an astonishingly thorough, scientifically accurate testing of radiation in the soil in 17 prefectures around Japan. Now, the English translation of a digest of this book has just been published. I spoke with Mare Inoue on Monday, October 21st, 2019.
Mari Inoue, welcome to Nuclear Hot Seat.
Thank you so much for inviting me to your show.
Let's start out with a little background on the Citizens Radiation Data Mapping Project. How did it get started and when did it get started?
After the Fukushima disaster, Japanese government continued to lie to the local people. They failed to provide the accurate information in terms of the radiation fallouts. They provided only limited food measurements or soil measurements in terms of radioactivity. So local people who were affected by the fallouts, not just in Fukushima prefectures, but neighboring prefectures, started to worry about the food that they are eating, about the streets that children played, or the wild grass they pick from mountains. So more and more, there was a movement which started mainly by mothers who are worried about the lives of their children, health and lives of their children. They wanted to make sure that they are feeding the right, less contaminated food for their children. So after the Fukushima disaster, many independent citizens-operated radioactivity measurement laboratories were established across Japan. Mothers, parents, grandparents who worried about children's health, they started asking questions like whether the food is safe, whether the soil is contaminated. And these laboratories started to measure the food in an effort to detect radioactive contamination. Now there are 30 citizens-operated radioactive measurement laboratories that are directly connected with the Minna-no Data Site, which is the organization that self-published Citizens Radiation Data Map of Japan. What they did was that initially these laboratories were decentralized. These laboratories were set up in different communities.
Were they in contact with each other before they set up, or this just all happened independent of each other?
All happened independently. Sometime in September 2013, Minna-no Data Site was established in an effort to integrate all the radioactivity measurement data into a common platform online so that there will be one website where they can share accurate information on food contamination or soil contamination from different communities. So Minna-no Data Site was established in order to centralize the information so that people can go to this one platform on the website to see what's going on. After this organization, Minna-no Data Site, was established, which is a collection of dozens of citizen-operated radioactivity measurement laboratories, they started this soil measurement project in October 2014. Until September 2017. So that's like a 3-year period. They started to collect data from different communities. 3,400 soil samples were collected by more than 4,000 people. And what was amazing is that they used a unified standard in collecting soil samples so that they can improve the accuracy of the data so that they can compare with the data from different communities. In the beginning, everyone was measuring in the different methods, and they thought that they need to standardize measurement standards so that they can compare among each other. So Minna-no Data Site came up with this idea with the support from scientists. They used this method so that other communities can use this method in order to collect these samples, soil samples. So they conducted seminars, more than 100 seminars across Japan. They even made this like comic book kind of booklet to explain what kind of steps people need to go through in order to accurately collect soil samples so that they can pack this in a certain way and send it to the laboratories for the analyzation.
How much do people pay to get this soil analyzed?
In the beginning, these laboratories did for free. I think recently, sometime starting from 2017, they are charging about 2,000 yen, which is less than like $18 US dollars. So it's a nominal fee.
And who comes up with the money to support this? Do the various groups? Is this
Right.
coming from individuals?
These citizens-operated radioactivity measurement laboratories have to have this very special device so that they can measure radioactivity in food and soil. And it's different from Geiger counters. It's quite expensive device. So people ask for donations, or sometimes people chipped in from their savings or through donations from community members. They purchased these devices and operated this kind of amazing laboratories operated by citizens.
It's an astonishing process to realize that regular citizens, mothers, parents who are concerned, have been out in Japan in over a 3-year period of time, taking these samples in such a scientific way that you're getting an accurate map of what the radiation is throughout this region. How far away from Fukushima were the samples taken? How many areas were covered? And what are some of the findings that came out?
This English edition, which was published in September, was based on the Japanese edition, which was published in November 2018. The original Japanese one has 200 pages, and it shows the contamination map of 17 prefectures. So Japan has 48 prefectures. So 17 prefectures in East Japan shows almost like 1/3 of the main island of Japan. So not just Fukushima prefectures or Miyagi prefectures or Tochigi prefectures, but it shows the contamination map. Soil samples were collected from Kanagawa prefecture, even in Tokyo. Most of the East Japan were covered.
What are the findings? You said before that the Japanese government's announcements about radiation findings could not be trusted. What has been found in this 3-year study, and how different is it from what the Japanese government has been putting out?
The reason why they started this soil measurement project was simply because government didn't do the soil measurement project.
They didn't do that at all?
They did only in limited location in Fukushima prefecture and selected locations, but that's it. As you know, that radiation fallout affected not only Fukushima prefectures, but other prefectures, including Tokyo, which was downside of the wind. People were worried about the soil contamination in those prefectures. And what the Japanese government did after Fukushima disaster was that they measured soil contamination using plane from 150 to 300 yards above ground. And they estimated the soil contamination, which is just an estimate. And they didn't even take soil samples from neighboring prefectures to let local communities know how contaminated their communities are.
That's insane. But of course, it's in the government's interest to hide this and normalize it as much as possible, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Yes. So local people are outraged because more and more they started, those mothers, some of them, they don't have a college degree or science background. They started to do some research and found out that some countries from the former Soviet Union conducted soil measurements after the Chernobyl disaster. Like, for example, in Russia and Belarus, they issued this radiation atlas, which shows the estimate of radiation contamination decades after the disaster. So they also enacted this Chernobyl law, which is known as social protection of citizens exposed to radiation due to the disaster of Chernobyl nuclear power plant. And according to this law, which was enacted about 5 years after the Chernobyl disaster, they designated evacuation zone, and they recognized right to evacuate based on the soil measurement. So these governments conducted soil measurement when Japanese government didn't after the Fukushima disaster. So that was a piece of information that people in Japan were frustrated when former Soviet countries did better job in terms of enacting, codifying some social protection for affected people.
Looking at the map, which is both on the cover of the English language booklet and also there's a clean version inside that doesn't have the writing over it, what's shocking is how many areas that have been tested are showing extremely high levels of radiation. You can tell by the colors of the dots from the various places where the radiation has been tested, and that some of the strongest radiation shows many, many miles away, I would say hundreds of miles away from Fukushima itself. Was that surprising? Was that expected? And exactly how dangerous is that?
Tokyo is about 200 miles away from Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. It is like a distance from New York City to DC. So it's not like thousands of miles away from Fukushima Daiichi. But these maps shows something that Japanese government could not provide. And also the map shows that Japanese media could not report on this type of investigation. So I think it's so significant and inspiring that local citizens collectively able to create this contamination map when Japanese government continue to lie and downplay the consequences of the Fukushima disaster, and the Japanese media fail to provide investigative journalism by sending their people to investigate on this kind of information. What we see from this booklet is amazing.
How is this information being disseminated in Japan? You say that it's a book of more than 200 pages. How has it gotten out, and has it gotten out to the general public?
Yes. Initially, they started collecting donations through crowdfunding. Before they started this soil measurement project, they had this atlas that the Soviet Union countries created, was something that they wanted to do. So they were able to gather, I believe, that a 50 to 60,000 US dollar worth of crowdfunding in Japan, and they published Japanese booklet, all colors, all pages are in color, 200 pages, and it was published in November 2018. Initially, they were hoping that maybe 2,000 copies will be sold, but after the book was published, they gave out some copies to those who supported the crowdfunding, and people started to order because they really loved the book. So in 2 months, they were able to sell more than 11,000 copies.
Is it available in bookstores or only online?
It's available in selected locations in Japan, in bookstores, and also online stores, including Amazon Japan. But unfortunately, they don't sell outside Japan.
How is the English language booklet, which is admittedly much shorter? It's about 16 pages. How is that being made available to English readers?
So what happened was that Rachel Clark, who is one of the core members of Manhattan Project for Nuclear Free World, she reached out to Minna-no Data Site, the organization that collectively worked on creating the map and publishing the Japanese version. Rachel gathered a team. Rachel was a coordinator, and the translation was done by Stefan, and editing was done by Tony and Karen, and I was part of the team as an advisor. And we are happy to be able to assist in the translation process so that the English booklet was published by Minna-no Data Site in Japan. And unfortunately, it's not published here in the U.S., but we have some copies.
The booklet, even though it's a condensation from the Japanese 200-page book, in the 16 pages, you manage to get an astonishing amount of information, not only about how this came together and the groups that did it. You have a chart and photographs and an explanation of how to take these kind of soil samples. And you also print full-color maps that push out the data. So we get to see not only what the contamination looked like in that 3-year period of time, but also what it is projected to look like in 2020, and then 10, 20, 30, and 100 years after the disaster began on March 11, 2011. And I must admit that the intensity of the radiation that is shown, the results of this, are shocking. Were you surprised to see how the contamination was going to linger? Was that expected? And has there been any response to that set of projections?
In terms of the map for July 2020, I heard that a Minna-no Data Site received many inquiries from overseas about radioactive contamination at the time of the 2020 Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they decided to have a map which shows the estimated value of radioactive cesium-137 in July 2020. And in terms of the extent of the radiation map or radioactive fallouts, I would say that the figure you see is conservative. I think the situation is a lot worse than this because the soil measurement project was done until September 2017. And I think that there were a couple of incidents after that where radiation was leaked from the crippled nuclear power plant. So this kind of incidents were not counted in the contamination map in this booklet. So I would say that the figure is conservative. I think the situation is worse than the Minna-no Data Site's data.
Has there been any official government response to the data map and the book, or have they interfered with your work in any way?
That I don't know, because I'm not the one who was part of the measurement project. But I know that recently there was a controversy when the Korean ruling Democratic Party issued a controversial map of some of the locations that will be hosting the Tokyo Olympics. And based on this controversial map, the Korean media said that this was based on Minna-no Data Site's data, but actually it was not. So when this article came out from the Korean media, Japanese government used this opportunity to discredit Minna-no Data Site, saying that, this data came from civil society and therefore it's not accurate.
The Japanese government is, of course, flogging the 2020 Summer Olympic Games as a public relations tool to convince the world that everything is all right and it's safe regarding radiation from Fukushima throughout Japan. Yet this study, this Citizens Radiation Data Map of Japan, absolutely contradicts that perspective. What are the implications of this study and the booklet and the book to the Olympics?
We know that Prime Minister Shinzo Abe described in 2013 that the Fukushima is under control, but actually it's far from under control. We have to keep in mind that the crippled nuclear power plant at Fukushima Daiichi is still releasing radioactivity into the air, into the groundwater, and they have this 1 million metric tons of contaminated water in their facilities, which they don't even know what to do. And the recent news was that Olympic torch relay will start from J Village Sports Complex in Fukushima, which is just 10 miles from the crippled nuclear power plant. And J Village Sports Complex used to be the hub for decommissioning process, decontamination process for the crippled power plant. So they put the low-level radioactive waste to J Village until 2017. It is problematic that this site was selected as a place to start the Olympic torch relay. And also, I think more than 25 municipalities in Fukushima will be holding a torch relay event, and 9 of them are within 30 miles from the plant. We also know that softball game will be held in Fukushima City. One baseball game will be held in Fukushima City as well. So they'll be exposing athletes to radioactivity. That is really concerning.
Have you attempted, or has there been an attempt to get copies of either the book or the data map to the International Olympics Committee to let them know what the real situation is?
No, I don't think Minna-no Data Site has done that, and I don't know any organization that have done that. But I think that that might be one of the options that we can do to raise awareness.
One of the things that I find shocking, if not horrifying, is that the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, is so concerned about heat issues during the summer that the marathon that was supposed to take place in Tokyo has now changed venue to Hokkaido. And yet they're doing nothing regarding radiation except to tell South Korea that they are overreacting. If you could say something directly to an athlete or even a spectator planning to come to Japan for the Olympics, what would that be?
The Fukushima disaster is not over. It's an ongoing crisis, and we don't know which part of the communities in Tokyo or Fukushima City has hotspots. We cannot feel, we cannot taste, or we cannot see radioactivity. That makes us very difficult to visually show to spectators or those organizations the extent of the nuclear disaster. But this map could be a way to show that radioactive contamination from Fukushima Daiichi affected so many communities, not just Fukushima Prefecture. And I hope that this information will give you you will be able to make an informed decision based on this information.
Is this radiation data map, is this a one-off, or are the tests continuing, and will there possibly be an updated version in the future?
They are continuing this type of soil measurements and food measurements. So if you go to Minna-no Data Site's website, you can see not only the soil measurement data, but also more than 16,000 cases of food measurement data. And they also check the water quality from groundwater, tap water, I believe, and other environmental samples such as ash, river, and so on. So they do more than soil measurements, and you can go to their website, but I'm not sure whether it's available in English.
Is there anything else you would like to add about the Citizens Radiation Data Map of Japan and the project that brought it to fruition?
Yes. This inspiring booklet won multiple journalistic awards, including 2019 Japan Congress of Journalists Award, which is amazing because just regular citizen was able to achieve this kind of prestigious award, which is usually given to groups or individuals with excellent journalism activities. And irony is that journalists or corporate media could have done this because they have resources, financial resources, human resources to conduct this type of large-scale investigation, but they fail to provide information for the people. So I'd like to emphasize that it's not just the government, but the media after the Fukushima disaster self-regulated what they inform about radiation-related news so that people in Japan were not well informed in terms of the extent of the Fukushima disaster.
The radiation data map provides very clear instructions, along with pictures and even a graph showing soil depth of how to take soil samples. Could this process of testing be used in areas such as those around the Santa Susana Field Laboratory near Los Angeles was contaminated, or the Tri-Cities area around the Hanford site, or the Savannah River site in South Carolina, or any other suspected or known to be contaminated nuclear site?
I think what we see from this booklet is that something that could happen anywhere outside Japan if there is a nuclear disaster. Also, there are so many communities that were affected by radioactive contamination due to nuclear testing, leaks from nuclear weapon sites, contamination from nuclear power plants or waste sites, and a nuclear disaster. So we can use this inspiring initiative to start a global movement to visualize contamination level in our communities and compare with other communities. If we can all use the unified measurement method like Japanese people did. And, this kind of initiative could be adopted in other communities globally so that we can visually create a map which could have impact on educating local communities, local environmental groups, elected officials, and concerned citizens, especially when we have this amazing initiative of Green New Deal and struggle against climate crisis. People are more and more interested in learning more about solutions, and we have to tell elected officials and concerned citizens that nuclear energy is not a solution to climate change. And I think that this kind of map could give them some visual idea as to how contaminated we are and what are we going to do with it, because waste issues, contamination issue is happening everywhere globally.
And of course, we will link to the various sites where you can purchase a copy of the digest edition in English. What I'd like to do now, though, is change topics slightly, because 2 weeks ago, Hurricane Hagibis barreled into Japan, and the northeastern part of the country, from Tokyo up past Fukushima, were particularly hard hit with wind and rain. What, if anything, is currently known by the citizen activists who have been doing the radiation readings about any change in radiation risks around Fukushima as a result of the storm?
I don't know the most recent information from the Minna-no Data Site, but I remember reading a warning from them soon after Japan was hit by typhoon that they're sending a warning to people that when you're dealing with the flat water or mud or debris affected by flat water, make sure that you wear masks and goggles, because radioactive materials or particles could be flying with the dust. So you have to protect yourself.
Wow.
But it's quite interesting because they issued this warning through social media, and it was shared more than 500 times. But this kind of warning didn't come from Japanese media. Although some article mentioned that it's important to wear masks and goggles in order to avoid infections from infectious diseases, which is also true, but none of the media mentioned anything about a possibility of exposing yourself from radioactive particles or dust. Minna-no Data Site was sending awareness to people soon after typhoon, and I think that's really important information that people need to know. I remember reading an article by NHK which quoted Mr. Koizumi, who is an environment minister. He said that there won't be any impact on the environment. But I think that's too soon to say such things. But that is something that Japanese government said soon after the Fukushima disaster. They kept saying that there is no immediate health risks from Fukushima disaster. So saying that everything is safe without accessing the information is very risky, and people will continue to be skeptical as to the information coming out from Japanese government.
And of course, in that is the standard word that is used to convince people that they're safe, which is saying that there is no immediate danger, which may be literally true because it takes years for contamination from radiation to show up as negatively impacting health. Anywhere from 3 to 5 years if we're talking about thyroid cancer or leukemia, which is so prevalent in children, all the way up to 8 to 10 years after for solid tumors and beyond for the rest of their lives. So anytime they say that there's no immediate danger, it's like the nuclear industry's get-out-of-jail-free card, when really all it is misdirecting attention and giving a false sense of security so that people don't panic.
Yes. That's the problematic. Probably they have that as in their disaster handbook or something. Like when they are going to make a statement, they have to say everything is fine and explain other things later.
What else is known about the impact of Hurricane Hagibis on Fukushima Prefecture?
Across Japan, more than 83 people passed away because of the typhoon. And among them, 29 or more lost their lives in Fukushima Prefecture. Fukushima Prefecture was hit the most compared with 13 other prefectures. They even had some leaks from the chemical plants that leaked sodium cyanide, and there are 2 plants that reported leaks from their plants. So this happened in Koriyama City, Fukushima Prefecture. So in addition to the radioactive debris leaked from the waste bags, these kind of toxic chemicals were also leached into the flat water. And that is another reason why you shouldn't be touching the flat water or debris or dust or mud that were affected by flat water. And I found it quite disturbing when I read an article about these high school students in, I think it was Iwaki City, and they volunteered to do the cleanup of neighbors who were affected by the flood. And I saw the photos of those children, and they're not wearing masks or goggles. And first of all, grown-ups should never allow children to do that kind of cleanup when we don't know what kind of material they were exposed to. But the media talked about this and showed as if this is such a beautiful thing to do.
Stunning. This is all stunning information, because what people don't know about radiation and about the contamination can already be harming them and may harm them further because of this latest exposure. Will there be more or more frequent testing of the soil in and around Fukushima in the wake of Hurricane Hagibis?
I think it will take time to find out, because this kind of soil measurements will take time, and laboratories basically are providing this kind of analysis with nominal fee. So I'm sure that it will take time to get some information, updated information in the wake of the typhoon.
Anything else you can share about the typhoon?
Yes. Minami-Soma City, and Iwaki City had citywide water outage after the typhoon, recent typhoon in October. And some districts suffer from water outage more than 1 week or more than 10 days. Especially in Iwaki City, the water purification facility was flooded, and because of that, still many households are suffering without water. So cities are providing clean water and providing facilities where you can take shower and bath, and even they set up portable bathrooms in different locations in the city.
All of this is a clear picture of the fact that Japan is not okay, as Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and the Olympic Committee and so many others are trying to convince us it is. And it's the work of the citizens who created this data map, and people like yourself and Rachel Clark and the others who are on the English language committee who have made it available to those of us here in the United States. It's an invaluable contribution to what we know about Japan and about the spread of radiation and the ongoing risks.
I just wanted to say that I'm just happy to be part of the team to make this English edition possible. And I'm very proud that Rachel Clark, Tony Sahara, Karen, and Stefan did an amazing job assisting the translation process, so that now there is an English edition so that it could be translated into different languages in Europe or Africa or other continents. I think it has so much possibility, and I'm just happy to be part of it.
And we're happy that you were part of it too, and we look forward to getting further updates from you on what is happening not only with radiation in Japan, but what is happening with this report. And anything we can do to help you with it, any information you want shared, we will be happy to do it and have you again on Nuclear Hot Seat. For now, thank you for being on this week's show, Mari Inoue.
Thank you so much.
That was Mari Inoue, co-founding member of the Manhattan Project for a Nuclear-Free World, and one of the team that translated the Citizens Radiation Data Map of Japan into English. More information about the Minna-no Data Site, which in Japanese means everyone's data site, and the English Digest booklet of Citizens Radiation Data Map of Japan is available at the website en.minna-no-ds.net. Look, don't worry about trying to copy it down. I'm going to link to everything on the website, nuclearhotseat.com, under this episode, number 435. So if you want to learn more about the Minna-no Data Site, if you want a copy of the English language digest of the report, and if you would like to know more about the Manhattan Project for a Nuclear-Free World, all of those will be linked on the website. Again, that's nuclearhotseat.com under this episode, number 435. Tomorrow, October 23rd, in San Francisco, there's going to be a groundbreaking Bay Area conference talking about nuclear issues in Spanish. It's called Latinos Unidos en el Desarme Nuclear por la Vida. The conference provides simultaneous translation for English speakers, and most of the information will be delivered in Spanish, so this may be the first ever such conference in the U.S. Quit Nukes is an Australian divestment campaign that is seeking to take the money out of nuclear weapons production. It sounds a lot like the Australian version of Don't Bank on the Bomb, which is the international group. We've had that group's leader, Susie Snyder of the Netherlands, on the show many times. Quit Nukes will officially launch in Australia on October 24th, which is the first day of UN Disarmament Week. I'm doing a shout out in case anybody knows any new information on that Russian nuclear explosion that happened back on August 8th. That's the one that killed 5 nuclear scientists, contaminated the hospitals they were brought to, and almost caused a Chernobyl-style evacuation of Ninoska, the village closest to the incident. Notice how quickly that story got eradicated from the news cycle? Well, not here if I can help it. If you have any credible information to add to what was known about a month, 6 weeks ago, what's happening since August, please, you let me know. I'll let everybody else know. And a reminder that if you have the ability to translate the English Digest booklet of the Citizens Radiation Data Map of Japan into other languages, perhaps vous, Monsieur Renard, contact either the Japanese or English groups. I'm certain they will be thrilled to help you set that up. Here's today's final thought. As those of you who follow me on Facebook know, I've started a very intensive 6-month speaker training program. Now, I'm already a pretty good speaker, but the purpose here is to learn better, more effective ways to convey the kinds of information presented on this show in speeches and workshops, and to people who are not already converted to the issue. You know, As a movement, it's not that anti-nuclear folk don't have compelling information. Those of us who oppose nuclear are lousy with information. But what we lack are compelling ways of delivering that information so that not only people are willing to listen to it, but they actively seek us out and demand that we tell them more so that they can act responsibly on nuclear issues. And let's face it, we need that if we're going to turn this world around, because nuclear is not clean or green or healthy for living things, and we've got to make certain that that is at the core of any message we get across. There are all kinds of speaker trainings that business people go through in order to learn how to give talks to build their businesses, even if they're not particularly good at speaking. What I'm attending is that kind of training on steroids. Only the business I'm engaged in is building ways to alert people to nuclear dangers and enroll them in fighting against the nuclear juggernaut. No used car salesman tactics. It's based on presenting the information with integrity and honesty, but utilizing tricks of the speaking trade to engage people, deliver the message, and move listeners to action. We all need to become better communicators if we're to have any hope of turning the nuclear juggernaut around and eliminating the nuclear propaganda from the so-called clean green energy category. So any tips or tricks I learn, I'll be passing them along on this show. This has been Nuclear Hot Seat for Tuesday, October 22nd, 2019. Material from this week's show has been researched and compiled from nuclear-news.net, deunrenard.wordpress.com, miningawareness.wordpress.com, and a lot of other sources I don't have time to list. A reminder that Nuclear Hot Seat is available on all your favorite podcast platforms, so click on the one you use the most and subscribe. If you prefer getting your link to Nuclear Hot Seat by email, go to nuclearhotseat.com and scroll down to find the yellow opt-in box. Put in your name, put in an email address. You'll get one a week. I promise you I will not bombard you with all kinds of stuff, but you will have the link to each week's show and a short description of what's in it. Now, I'm dependent on all of you on the front lines to help me know what's going on. So if you have a story lead, a hot tip, or a suggestion of someone to interview, send an email to info@nuclearhotseat.com. That's much better than trying to send me something on Facebook where I tend to lose things and they fall between the cracks. And if you appreciate weekly verifiable news updates about nuclear issues around the world, take a moment to send that donation. Any size helps. Go to nuclearhotseat.com and look for the big red donate button. We will really be grateful for your support. This episode of Nuclear Hot Seat is copyright 2019, Libby Halevi and Hardestry Communications. All rights reserved, but fair use allowed as long as proper attribution is provided. This is Libby Halevi of Hardestry Communications, the heart of the art of communicating, reminding you that, as Margaret Mead and that Citizens Radiation Data Map of Japan proves, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. There you go. You've just had your nuclear wake-up call, so don't go back to sleep, because we are all in the nuclear hot seat.
Nuclear hot seat. What are those people thinking? Nuclear hot seat. What have those boys been drinking? Nuclear hot seat. The corium is sinking. Our time to act is shrinking, but our activists are linking. Nuclear hot seat. It's the bomb.
Question everything. Intelligent radio for intelligent people. UCY.TV.
Truth on the Tracks you can catch every Monday night and Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on